Kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome back to another edition of Big Hairy News. Good to be back with you. Hello all. Hello, good evening. Good evening to you. Yes, just me and Nala here tonight. One of the reasons it's just me and Nala is we have a conversation with an American commentator. Her name is Nomiki Konst. She is someone who works in the field of democratic politics. She has run for office. She has been a political commentator on groups like the Young Turks and Sam Seder's Majority Report and done her own show as well. And I had done podcasting with Nomiki before, so I wanted to see if she wanted to come on board and have a bit of a chat. And tonight we have a conversation for you with her, and that's going to be the main feature of the show. We had the conversation at 12:30 this afternoon. Is there much more to add since that? I'm thinking about the results. Maybe there's not, so the conversation will still feel pretty much up to date. Now, before I do that, as terrible as this sounds, because I don't have a co-host with me tonight, well, sorry, no offense, is double checking as always to make sure you can hear this, because if you can hear this, then you'll be able to hear the product. Here it comes. It's my tester to make sure you can hear it.
Are you serious?
So just let us know in the chat if you can hear that or not.
Serious, is he?
I didn't have to.
And if you can, we are good to go. And if you're not, I'll have to do one other thing to make sure that it's all working. So just let us know if you heard that, if you heard the cackle of the Wicked Witch of the West in the background. And if that is the case, we can get up and running with the show for today. If you did not hear it, then I will need to log out of something and log back into something. All right. Hope you're well. The reason it's just me and Nala tonight is because I've got this pre-recorded conversation with Nomiki, and there was no point having Chewy here. Sorry, but I do apologize about that. Simon can hear it. It sends shivers down my shoulder to your spine. Because this conversation is 40 minutes, and I said to Chewy, you're welcome to come as always, but you'll just be sitting in the waiting room for 40 minutes while it plays out. Why don't you take a chill, and maybe we'll see you tomorrow night? And Chewy was like, that sounds like a great idea. So that's the main reason for it. So lots to talk about tonight. I'm going to start with having a bit of an update as to where we are today with those midterms. I want to talk a bit about the Reserve Bank. Reserve Bank had a report done on today. Some of the report was good, some wasn't so good, but overall it seems that it's probably, the old, what do you call them? You had when the gladiators, when they fought, and they had the guy up the top, Caesar, giving them the thumbs up or the thumbs down. The report is probably like a there, maybe not quite a neutral. It's okay, but it's not quite good. So it's probably a there kind of report. For those of you listening, my thumb is at about a 45-degree angle, not a completely vertical. We'll have a quick look at that. And also, as I said, an update on where we're at with the midterms, a little bit about how Donald Trump has responded to it. And then we will get into the interview. And it seems that some of you have already seen it, because as you know, if you're part of our Patreon, if you're a patron, you get access to them early. Sai says, interesting interview with Nomiki. So Sai's obviously watched it. I feel she thinks the corporate Democrats can be bargained into getting more than scraps. The progressives need to put up their own candidates to change the dynamic. So there you go. I guess that means Sai is going to be bailing on us in about 10 minutes when we play the interview. But if you are a patron, part of our Patreon, and as you can see down the bottom, thanks to some of our $50 patrons, I'll just put the actual patron down there. There it is. Patreon.com/Big Hairy News, and you do get early access to anything that I do during the day. And sometimes you get long version. This is a borderline one because it's about 40 minutes. And my rule now is if it's kind of close to an hour, it'll only go on Patreon and we'll play clips. This is less than an hour, so I'm playing the whole thing on the show tonight, just so you know how it kind of works. All right, so we're going to start with US politics because I don't want to go from politics to politics in the US, and then we're going to go to the whatchamacallit in between, to the Reserve Bank. Let's have a quick look. This was only up on off CNN about an hour and a half, 2 hours ago maybe, so it's fairly up to date. Having a look at where things stand 24 hours after polls have closed. How have we got no sound when people said they heard the laughing? Are you serious? There's no sound for that? Oh my goodness, guys. What is going on here? Right, I'm gonna have to do something. How does that work? Says someone. I tested it. You heard me test it. Sorry, guys. I haven't turned off the screen tonight though. So I'm just gonna take this off and I'm gonna have to shut that screen off. Stop screen. I'm gonna have to reshare the screen, share screen, share system audio there and share. Now you're gonna have to tell me again. Just tell me if you can.
In American politics, including Arizona and Nevada. So you just heard from Gary and from Kyung. Let's start in Arizona, where Kyung is. As she noted, the last time votes were reported, Mark Kelly's lead increased. The key is to watch the next batch of votes and the one after that. If you remember the dynamics, in 2020, it was Joe Biden's lead that kept shrinking. He won the state in the end, but his lead was shrinking as the ballots come in. So the key is what happens as we go forward. And David laid out the percentages in Nevada. We have the percentages for Arizona as well. So we have to watch this play out. A vital state, obviously a vital race, a Democratic incumbent facing a challenger from a Trump-endorsed Republican there, critical to the 50-50 balance we currently have in the Senate. Where will it end up? And then quickly in Nevada, this is where Gary is. He's in Clark County. It's 75%, 74% of the state vote. And the question is, can Cortez Masto improve that percentage as more and more votes come in? That's what she needs to overcome.
So what he's saying is that's a segment within the overall, that's a county within the overall state. And where we're at the moment in Nevada, just so you know, I looked at some numbers and I did a little bit of estimating based on their 76-80% completion rate. In Nevada at the moment, the Dems there's about 200,000 votes to still come in. If you work on how many number of votes there have been and what percentage of the votes have been counted, that means there's about 200,000 to go. And for the Dems to take the lead, they need about 120,000 of those votes. So they need to get, what is that? That's 50%, 60%. So they need to get 60% of the votes to actually win Nevada, which is unlikely.
One other key question there is, can she turn Washoe County here, where Reno is, and then the rural areas to the north? That's a swing county. Usually the color of this county in the end can determine who wins the state. Laxalt with a slight lead there right now. Again, more votes to be counted. I just want to come to this other map just very quickly to get to the question here, which is, why do these races matter? Well, of course they matter to the citizens of Arizona and Nevada. They also matter to the dynamics here in Washington. Who controls the United States Senate? This is a runoff in Georgia. We know that now on December 6th. The question is...
So that's confirmed. It might have been confirmed last night. So Georgia is a runoff. No one got to 50.1%. So therefore, they're going to run off on the 6th of December.
If Senator Kelly can keep his lead here, and Senator Laxalt can keep that lead here, neither of these are guaranteed, by the way. As you heard both correspondents, tens of thousands of votes still to be counted. But they're so consequential because if that happened, if those two races stayed the same, then guess what? Republicans have 50, Democrats have 49, and once again, the Georgia runoff would determine the control of the United States Senate. If Democrats would get back to 50, where they are now, the vice president breaks the tie, Republicans would get to 51. So any change in those races affects whether or not this Georgia runoff in December is...
So if for some reason, and it's unlikely, that the Democrats can get 60% of the remaining votes in Nevada and keep holding on to Arizona, then Georgia's out of play. But it seems like the most likely scenario, as we will find out in the first week of December, who wins the Senate.
Decisive, Anderson, and we're going to have to wait, listening to Kyung and Gary, for a while to get that. And just quickly, I just want to come over. You mentioned the House totals at the top of the race. I just want to show you the map as it fills in. Looks like a lot of red, but Republicans are not at the finish line. Republicans thought by now, they thought by this time last night, we would be saying there will be a Republican majority in the House of Representatives. Here we are, Wednesday night, 11:07 in the East. The Republicans are called. We have called 209. So they are now 9 House seats short of 218, the magic number for majority. Democrats 20 seats behind them right now at 189. Let's look where they're ahead. This is really interesting. Republicans are ahead right now in enough seats if nothing changed, to get a majority. But look how narrow a majority it would be if it stopped right now. It's not going to stop right now. Some of these races will take days. Some could take longer than that to count. But you just get the expectation from looking at those numbers where they stand right now that, yes, the probability is Republicans get to a majority. It's also likely that's going to be a very narrow majority. December 6th.
Really
The
important
question,
to know that as well, because what happens in the midterms traditionally is it swings. Yeah, it goes to the side who doesn't have the White House, and it goes massively to the side that doesn't have the White House. Like I think when I'm talking to Nomiki, she talks about in 2008 something. It was a 60-seat swing, and then it was a 45-seat swing. So it's a massive swing. So when you're hearing it's not a red wave, that's what they're talking about. Normally it's like a 60-seat swing in the Congress, right? And it's going to be like a 5-seat majority. So it's not a red wave. The other thing I wanted to point out is in here where Arizona is going on at the moment, the Dems are ahead. And much like the number of votes still to come in, there's probably about 650,000, 700,000 votes still to come in, and the GOP need to take in between 350 and 400,000 of them. So about 55% of the vote, maybe a bit more than that, to win that, which is unlikely. Which is why Nevada is likely going to be Republican, and Arizona is likely to be Democrat, and then we go to the runoff. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about the red wave as well, because this is just me doing a search for midterms in my YouTube feed, right? And obviously, it'll be my YouTube feed, but you can actually see red tsunami stemmed. A good day for America. It's so many people are celebrating. Democrats fend off red wave. So many places are celebrating, especially commentators. GOP points finger at Trump for disappointing midterms. Trump, the biggest midterm election loser. Democrats fend off red wave. I just want to be really blunt. This is all we'll talk about. All these commentators who are, especially Democratic commentators, who are celebrating the fending off of the red wave. The red wave doesn't matter. It doesn't matter when it comes to the win and the loss. If the win column is a win by 1 seat, then the Republicans still get control of the House. If, for example, you support a terrible rugby team and I support the best rugby team in the country, and your terrible rugby team gets within 1 point of the best rugby team in the country, you still lose, even though you've performed well. At the end of the season, that still goes down as a loss, and the winning team, albeit the losing team performed well, still get the points for that win. So I kind of want to couch this celebratory tone by those on the left saying, oh, how embarrassing, look at the red wave. Because if the GOP they are going to get control of the Congress, that's almost a guarantee, but that's a likely scenario, and they may still get control of the Senate. There's nothing to be celebrating if you are a supporter of those on the left. So I just want to temper it. I want to be like, guys, a loss is a loss. And if the Republicans get the win and the Democrats get the loss, all these current Democratic operatives and commentators who are going, how embarrassing, look what's happened, oh my goodness, are still going to be on the losing side and are still going to be like under the threat of legislative change. Once the Republicans get control of Congress, that's where you also bring charges against the president. All those sorts of things will be easier to be done, even if they win by 1 seat or 1 district. So let's just temper the celebration and go, yes, it's not as good for the Republicans as everyone was predicting, but hey, if they still win, then that's still a win for the right, and the left are going to have to deal with that. I also wanted to point out the response by Donald Trump. Here's something off stuff.co.nz. The updates are still there, 48-49, as you can see. Donald Trump was reportedly livid and blaming everyone, including his wife, Melania, as his bid to reclaim the White House in 2024 was thrown into disarray by the United States midterm elections. Some advisors were urging him to postpone his plan to declare his candidacy or declaration of his candidacy on November 15 at Mar-a-Lago, although his doing so could be seen as an admission of defeat and was highly unlikely. Trump was said to be particularly annoyed by the loss of Dr. Mehmet Oz, the TV doctor he backed in the Pennsylvania Senate race. New York Times reporter Maggie Haberman, who's just written a book on Trump, actually, or released a book, wrote on Twitter, Trump is indeed furious this morning, particularly about Mehmet Oz, and is blaming everybody who advised him to back Oz, including his wife, describing it as not her best decision, according to people close to him. It's a lot worse than that. I don't have the clip for you, but his Kayleigh McEnany, his former press advisor, has said that DeSantis should get to Georgia to help Republicans win Georgia, but Trump should stay away and Trump shouldn't announce his candidacy next week. The reason they're saying that is because most voting people see him as a cancer. In other words, Trump being on the ticket before Georgia turns Georgia into a basically a poll about Trump or no Trump, even though he's not running on that ticket. So, there are many within the Republican Party who are turning or have turned against Trump, and they are now at least publicly acknowledging it's not so good for him to be associated with these midterms. Please don't, Mr. Trump. Of course, Mr. Trump is the most egotistical person in the world, and I'm going to show you a clip just to confirm that shortly, and the most thin-skinned in the world. So for him not to announce next week would be an embarrassment to him, because he's already pre-announced he's going to do it, and would be seen as a step down, as a backing away from what's going on. So most of you may have seen this clip, but I'll play it for you anyway. Anyway, this is Donald Trump being asked about if they win or if they lose the midterms, and he quite literally, without an ounce of irony or sarcasm, says if they win it's about me, and if they lose it's got nothing to do with me. Quite literally.
You've endorsed more than 330 candidates this election cycle. Tonight, win or lose, the results for Republicans, how much of that will be because of Donald Trump?
Well, I think if they win, I should get all the credit. And if they lose, I should not be blamed at all. Okay. But it'll probably be just the opposite. When they win, I think they're going to do very well. I'll probably be given very little credit, even though in many cases I told people to run. And they ran, and they turned out to be very good candidates. They've turned out to be very good candidates.
Which is not the case, obviously. He did put his support behind 300 candidates, of which about 174 won. So there's a lot that lost. But most of the people he put his endorsement on were already incumbents, were already going to win. His thumbs up didn't do anything. The ones that he did put his thumb on the scale for, men like that were more outsiders, most of them lost. So even though he can say 174 wins, 9 losses, which is what he's trying to say, although he endorsed over 300, so I'm not quite sure about that maths, most of who he endorsed were already incumbents and didn't need his help to get there. Most of who needed his help to get there, who weren't the incumbents, it was harmful for them to have the Trump name attached to them.
But usually what would happen is when they do well, I won't be given any credit. And if they do badly, they will blame everything on me. So I'm prepared for anything, but we'll defend ourselves.
So there you go. I always find it fascinating, and probably tomorrow night on the show, I've got a possibility of a special for tomorrow night, but I don't want to talk about it in case it's unlikely to happen. But I've had an interaction. If you've been following me on Twitter today, you can go and have a look at it for yourself. A Trump type person. He's not literally a Trump supporter, but that whole kind of QAnon anti-vaxxer world and me have been having I've actually been having fun on Twitter today. And unfortunately with someone who is incredibly thin-skinned, they take everything very seriously and they don't understand that someone is somewhat trolling them. And I know when I said this last time, I got some criticism from you, darling, people saying, lowest form of humor, trolling people, Pat. And I'm like, I agree, but it was still fun. And, what I've done is got some screen grabs of the conversation, and I'll probably share them with you tomorrow night, because it's always fascinating to me, especially those on the right who portray themselves as the big, hard, tough men, often are the biggest snowflakes, like they claim everybody else is. It's just such a strange, and they melt so quickly. And we may have an example of that for you tomorrow night. Some messages about this that was almost came in. Glenn Beck was almost in tears. Murdoch Media has gone all out on Trump today. They're promoting Ron DeSantis as their favorite. Trump will launch his campaign next week. Ron will do well until the debates. This is his kryptonite. Very good. Dun, 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 dun. Haha, I love seeing when Fantaface is mad. To be fair, that's a fucking great quote. This one here, I've had a few spats with the Republicans today, LOL, on Facebook. So it's going on. It's going on. Right. We're going to keep moving because we've got a conversation tonight with Nomiki, as I said, and I want to get to that, and I don't want to be here until midnight playing it. So we're going to move straight into our next story, and our next story is on the Reserve Bank. Hang on, I'll just double check. Was there anything else I was going to talk about? No, that was what I was talking about. Okay. The Reserve Bank had a bit of a report done on them today, and I'll just play it for you first rather than give you the heads up. We'll give you the heads up afterwards.
Inflation would be slightly lower if the Reserve Bank had acted sooner to lift the official cash rate, a major report has found. The report largely...
Now, we knew this. We've been talking about this since the start, that the people or the group mainly in control of inflation, mainly, not completely, but mainly, is the Reserve Bank, and their projections are the main thing that leads to either high or low inflation, and they got it wrong. So this, even though this report is not too harsh on them, it's pointing out that, and I think an overly polite way, but it's pointing out that it would have been, now they've said slightly lower, so let's be fair and say, you know, what, a couple of basis points, or who knows what it would have been, but it is acknowledging that the inflation is where it is today, based on some decisions the Reserve Bank got wrong. Although, to be fair to the Reserve Bank, they got them wrong in a time where they were projecting in a pandemic, and how, you know, kind of how could you get it right?
Praises the bank for its decisions during the, quote, uniquely challenging last few years. But that hasn't stopped the political flack, as business correspondent Katie Bradford reports.
Aotearoa cut off from the world. 2020 was, as we've heard so often, an unprecedented year.
Very, very difficult economic times.
Genuine fears about that saw the Reserve Bank take the path of least regrets, slashing the official cash rate to 0.25% and launching a massive program of quantitative easing, aka money printing.
It's how difficult it is, perhaps in a good way, to remember just how dark times were back in early 2020.
This 122-page report, carried out by the Reserve Bank but independently reviewed, gives the central bank an A grade for its handling of the economy through the pandemic. But the report card finds room for improvement, mainly that it should have moved faster to lift the OCR as inflation started rising in 2021.
It would have most likely just been marginally below where it is currently. The Monetary Policy Committee would have had to have perfect foresight of the whole series of supply shocks that have rolled through the global economy these past few years, including, of course, the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
By late last year, criticism of the Reserve Bank's actions or inaction was building. Some economists today saying this shows that criticism was justified.
Well, but does it or doesn't it? Because what they're saying is they basically had to predict the lotto numbers to get this right. You know, they had to predict a war in Ukraine. They had to predict what was going to happen with the pandemic. There was lots of things that they had to get just right. It's like, you know how you have, like, it's like an electric car will do 400 miles. Yeah, it will in a factory under the best case circumstances. But in real life, it'll do 280 or 320. This is like, in the best case scenario, they may have gotten it right and it would have been better. But it's never the best case scenario. So is it really warranting of criticism of them, or is it just worth acknowledging? Is it worth acknowledging that the Reserve Bank has a part to play in it, and it's not all about Labor's spending, let's say, for example, because you know that's coming?
9 areas for improvement were identified.
What this does is give a really good guidebook to how to handle a major crisis, and there are a number of lessons learned in there, including the way in which different tools are deployed, the way decisions are taken.
But National says the report should have been truly independent.
Did New Zealand keep this stimulus in place for too long? Did the government keep spending at a rate that was unsustainable, that was driving into domestic inflation? Has it actually worsened bank profit, made bank profits larger? Has it actually worsened the cost of living crisis?
They've also criticised the reappointment of Adrian Orr as governor.
I have no comments about the politics. I also don't feel unique globally. Central banks are under immense attack. I can say is I'm extremely proud to be leading this institution.
Work now begins on any changes to be better prepared for the next unprecedented event.
So there you go. So basically the report's coming out and it's saying the Reserve Bank did well during the pandemic, you know, like in those absolute emergency times. And they didn't do quite so well when it came to predicting the unpredictable. And so it's probably a B score. Did well with the pandemic, kept us all going financially, and then work needed in the when it comes to their contribution to where inflation is today. I think it's worth looking at, and I think it's worth understanding always, because we will continue to be told by National that inflation is 100% to do with the Labor Party and their spending. We're being told that's not the case. And I think if we stop and we think about it, we know that because no matter what left or right government you have, no matter where it is in the world, no matter what kind of political ideology you have, inflation is terrible. And New Zealand is one of the, say, bottom third when it comes to it. So if you just stop and think logically, it's a hard pill to swallow, but you know, it is what it is. Right, let's play this conversation with Nomiki. And now again, I'm a little bit freaked out to make sure the sound plays, because this seems to happen when I'm only by myself. So I'm going to hit play. I'm going to keep watching. If you can't hear it, let me know straight away. Just a quick comment from the side there. I'm glad he brought up all central banks are under pressure. It's a shame journalists didn't discuss that point. Free Soul says New Zealand seems to have a blame culture, blame the government for everything. It's a little bit like Donald Trump, isn't it? Blame the government when it's bad. You won't give them credit when it's good. That's kind of what he was saying. So what I'm going to do is hit play on this conversation with Nomiki. Now, the conversation was going to be about the midterms and the results, but as you know, our style, it kind of went all over the place, and it talked about left versus right, and it talks about, you know, how the left operates, and it talks a lot. If you know Sam Seder's show, Sam's never been on this show, but he has been on my podcast before. There was a bit of a falling out between Nomiki and the Sam Seder crew. She hasn't really ever talked about that before until this conversation. So she talks about that as well, along with a bunch of other things. And we do eventually talk about the results as per the midterms as well. Okay, I'm going to hit play. I'm going to watch the screen to make sure everyone can hear it. And then I am going to see you when it's finished, hopefully, or I'm going to come back and go, what's going on? Here we go. We'll see you in a tad. Yep. Coming to us live from Puerto Rico, Nomiki Konst is with us, Director of Matriarch, political commentator, the DNC Unity Reform Commissioner, as put in that position by Bernie Sanders, in fact. Nomiki Konst, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Pat, and for giving space to talk about our ever-changing democratic system and representation.
Well, first of all, we're at the end of a political day, so cheers.
Cheers. I've got a lot of traffic, so I think this is worth it.
Now, you've been, I've got kind of 2 or 3 things to talk about today. But obviously the major part is about the results where we're at and where we're going to go to. But first, what have you been up to for the past 24 hours? Because you must be like a pig in shit. You know, this is like heaven for people who are in. Right. I kind of know what that is. If there's a double thing going on, I don't know what's going on with my system. This is me in the background, by the way, but I'll show you what I'm going to do. I'm going to get out of that screen. I'm going to go back into the screen. And then this time I'm not going to click on the tab that I had to click on last time, and it will probably work. Right. I apologize about this. Oh God, where'd you go? Now tell me if this is double timing it now. Political commentary, they want to be involved in everything. What does your last 24, 36, 48 hours look like?
Well, you know, so you mentioned I was in the DNC Unity Reform Commission, and that was something that occurred, that came out of the 2016 election, you know, really the primary process. And the goal of the commission, there were 21 members, was to, yes, deal with superdelegates, yes, deal with the presidential primary process. But what I was on a committee for in particular was to deal with the Democratic Party's infrastructure, and why they lost so many seats during the Obama years, 1,200 seats, state legislative seats. So, you know, I'm kind of looking at this from a little bit of a different perspective than I think people who are cheering like, oh, well, you know, we didn't have a bloodbath. And it's like, okay, well, I mean, I know historically that this was a midterm that Biden outperformed pretty much every president since they've been. I would actually argue about that because the Democrats held the House for 30 years until the early 90s. So I think some of these commentators are spinning fast and loose a little bit. But what I will say is that part of the reason why we didn't lose as many seats was because we lost those 1,200 seats. So they're already gone.
You can't lose more if they're already gone.
I mean, some of them. Listen, we've won back a bunch of them. In 2018, we won back a lot of them. So I don't want to discount that. But you know, we're in a different situation. You know, we've moved a little bit further, and furthermore, you know, we have Georgia that's going to go to a runoff. We don't know if we're going to keep the Senate. We're not going to keep the House. And fundamentally, at the end of the day, it's about, do we have power? And while I'm really happy that radicals, radical right extremists, many, although there's a couple that got through, were blocked. You know, I'm very happy about that. And I'm really happy that people like Wes Moore made history in Maryland and, you know, we might see some history potentially in Arizona where people think that that was a red state. It was a blue state in 2006. Used to have a Democratic governor. These are all good things, but there's also places on the map like Nevada where I think it was pretty much, unanimous opinion that it was much more democratic. It was a union-heavy state than maybe other parts of the West that are a little bit more free-spirited, libertarian. Nevada had a strong union culture because of the casinos, because of the workers there, the service workers, and frankly, because of Harry Reid, because he was able to keep that operation in place for so long. So to see Nevada potentially go almost completely red is extremely concerning to me. Because we just need to have power, and like you can sugarcoat it, you can spin it however you want. I'm glad we're not as far right as some thought we were going to be, but if we don't hold all the power, we're in a situation in which, we have a lot of work to do. And there's now an excuse for not getting some of that stuff in time. But credit where credit is due. Listen, I don't think the DNC and the DCCC in particular put forth a strategy, and the DSCC, the Senate, the state committees, put forth a strategy that we called for on the commission. With that being said, credit should be given to the Biden administration, because I do think that Joe Biden, maybe even just as a figurehead in this moment of insanity, people voted. You see this in multiple races where some people didn't vote for the more, in their opinions, maybe radical candidate, and they voted for, or they voted against a radical right candidate.
Yeah.
But Republican on the down ballot. So, and in the exit polls, a lot of Biden is polling much higher than pretty much everybody else. So,
look, I think one of the points you've made, which I don't see other people making. I mean, I've been looking at a lot of YouTube commentators over the last 24 hours, and lots of things like, no red wave, an embarrassment to the GOP, all this sort of, and I'm like, hang on, but so no red wave, if they win by one seat, then they have power.
That's right.
So in other words, I was thinking about it, if you're supporting a sports team and they're the worst team in the field, and you're supporting another sports team and they're the best, and your last team like overperforms so well and they get within 1 point of winning against, everyone's gonna be like, what a great performance by that terrible team, but you still lost and you still don't have the W at the end of the day. So I understand the commentary of the Republicans were expected to do better, but I think there's a little bit too much celebrating at the moment like they've done badly, because if they still get the W, then they still get the W, whether it's by 1 or whether it's by 25, So yeah, I think that the left in America, from looking from this side of the world, seems to be celebrating at the moment because maybe they won't lose by as much as they thought they were going to, but it might still be a loss.
And really, those numbers were all over the place in terms of, we're taking polls, we're taking, some of these polls just a few days ago were outrageous. The fact that they put Kathy Hochul up next to Lee Zeldin, and there were some folks who I knew on the ground working very closely with upstate in the more conservative areas of New York, saying, no, I don't think it's that close. It doesn't mean that there isn't a red wave in New York. Like, we lost some House seats. We lost Sean Patrick Maloney, who's the chair of the DCCC. But that is partly because we had a redistricting process that was a mess, and the judge who overruled the congressional seats and the Senate seats was a Republican judge upstate. So, some of this stuff is a little bit more nuanced, and I think that's my frustration with all media in general, but I mean, in particular, the online media, because there's no editorial. I'm not saying that. Let me be clear. I'm not saying that corporate media has the greatest editorial standards, but after 2016, and especially right now on CNN, which is on in the background right now, there's you got to be really careful before you speculate certain numbers, and I think we can be a little fast and loose. And not understand that, I've worked in politics. I've been a political commentator. I've worked on presidential campaigns. I've worked on local campaigns. My family was not, in office. And so it kind of gives you different aspects of how the game is played. And I say that because, even as political commentators, sometimes we're used, and we don't even know it, as a weapon by campaigns to push out a certain message. And, I will stand by this. The Democrats know what makes them win. It is called investing that hard-earned money, that record number of dollars they've raised every single year. It's like a new high record.
Yep.
And putting them into state parties all year round. Because that's how we're going to win the state legislatures. That's how we're going to recruit new talent. That's how we're going to recruit great staff members. And when we win back the state legislatures, next 10 years, redistricting is going to be more in our favor because the population of America is more progressive. It's just we have a gerrymandering problem. We have the Koch brothers and other conservatives, recruiting and training for the last 40 years across the country, and and the Democrats have simultaneously pulled away from local support. So when you're not there spreading your message that Americans probably do support, someone's going to fill that void. And we see how that's played out.
And look, I think it's fairly clear, perhaps worldwide, but probably specifically in America, the right do politics better than the left. The right stay on task, they stay on topic, even if they have to support a, pussy grabbing, terrible businessman who is not pro-life and has done all these terrible things. They get behind him, they stay on topic, and they go for it. The left like to eat their own. The left like to go, actually, you're not a leftist like me, so therefore I'm against you. We've all experienced that on some level, that part of your allies turn around and say, you're not enough left to be onto it. Whereas the right's like, I don't care if you're not enough right. If I vote for you, then my views still go through. They play politics better. The left need to learn how to do that on some level. And one of the saddest things I saw in the last few years is, what's the name of the group of Republicans that came out against Trump and they did all that advertising campaign? The Lincoln Project. So you had a bunch of Republicans showing the Democrats how to do politics against the Republicans, so I think that was the archetypal sort of look at how the right understand politics in today's culture better than the left do.
Well, I'm even going to say from this perspective, and this is, sometimes I say these things on certain shows and they're, people are like, well, I'm like, listen, once you worked in politics, you know how dark and dirty it is. It's not, apologies, I'm at a hotel. There's people walking by in the background. Some of this stuff is not accidental. It's not that the Democrats are inept. They know what works. It worked for 30 years. We had the House. We know a unifying economic message that's the economy's stupid works. We know that, it's just logical, but it's also just political science. We know that investing your message all across the country, and we definitely know after losing 1,200 seats and having a commission that produced a report saying you need to invest your money all across the country, creates, you don't do that, there's a vacuum where the right can swoop in. And we also know that after crises, there's the potential of fear mongering, and we're seeing that all over the world, but very much so in cities across America, where even well-meaning leftists, and I understand where it's coming from. I understand where it's coming from because you do see a different type of crime that is rooted in really systemic issues that the left should be fighting to fix. But we are now in a place where historically movements don't have that solidarity for very long. And, whether people are buying into right wing or seeing things and feeling fear, or growing older and having kids and feeling fear about having whatever, it's like feelings, or straight up, there are people who are there on the left to instigate and create divisions. And there are people who flipped, like Tulsi Gabbard, who just went straight up Republican. So you're seeing these things all over the place. This is really normal in movements historically. And I just urge people on the left to be much more conscious of it. Groups do get infiltrated. I know that sounds conspiracy, but it's true. Historically, there have been, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of books about how MLK was spied on, and the Black Panthers, and Abby Hoffman. Do we have to go through this? This is how Bernie Sanders was the strongest movement we've had on the left, probably even before the 60s in some ways electorally. So are we not surprised when it's so easy to create divisions online nowadays that we fall for certain tactics? I don't think it's that the Republicans are better at messaging or know how to win. I think Democrats do know how to win. I just think that our center left is tied to corporate interests and don't know how to disconnect from it.
I think and I know that's just a television show, but Newsroom was one of my favorite shows with Jeff Bridges. I always forget which Jeff it was. And that very, very first scene where he looks over to the left-leaning Democrat candidate, and he goes, why do you guys lose so goddamn much? And it's like I can see it. I mean, I guess I'm being a little bit overly simplistic, but I do think about the idea of messaging being stronger from the right, and I do think about the voters being more adhered to a group on the right and more fractured on the left, and I think it's always been that way. But the infiltration thing is interesting as well, because we had it here in New Zealand very clearly in the 1980s. There was a politician called Richard Prebble who was part of our Labour Party, which is basically our Democrats, right? And he got into power and he got into the government and he became a minister of the Crown. So he was, he was at the big seat, and he started to bring in selling our publicly owned assets, which is not a left-wing policy. And that happened under a Labour government, a left-wing government. And then quite soon after that, Richard Prebble left that and he formed what is called the ACT Party, which is our far-right party. So he went from being involved in the left government. Behind him, there was a drive to do right-wing policies. And then when he left the Labour Party, he went and formed a far-right party that's still in Parliament today. So, yeah, I don't know whether that was infiltrated or a ideological change or a grift. I don't know, but you see it everywhere.
Yeah,
these people floating.
Sometimes you do know, sometimes you don't. Sometimes they're just influenced by the people who are there to instigate. I mean, we're seeing the weaponization of identity politics to divide the left right now in a really aggressive way that I've seen stuff against, and I've experienced it myself, against allies, where you're like, whoa. Like, and it's to silence people in some ways and create fear so that they don't speak out. And at the end of the day, we should be unifying in an intersectional approach, intersectional identity with economic policy approach, and we know that's what's worked. But Twitter has and YouTube have created this space where really bad ideas are spreading and are being rewarded through incentives of clicks and retweets and monetization and being popular. And there's I've been all different sides. I've been the popular person. I've been the smeared person. I can tell you a lot of it is not real. And you will you may say something that's against the US government or the Democratic Party one day online, and you'll get boosts from influencers from Iran, with like American names or whatever, or Russia, of course, and you have no idea, or the right wing. And then one day you say something like saying, good on Joe Biden for canceling, this number of dollars in student debt. And then suddenly they come after me, or like, same people are like, well, that's not normal. That's not how humans operate unless you're Elon Musk. Like,
I understand what you're saying, not to the same extent that you have, but I've seen it as well, involved in what we're doing. And you just got to find your lane. And so where we're at right now is we've found our lane, we're in our lane, and those people who were allies who have pushed us out of the boat or who we've stepped out of the boat, we're like, fantastic, you do you, boo, go and do you, fight your fight. We're going to keep fighting our fight. And, at the end, we want the same outgo overall. I think the whole unity question is nice on some level, but I also think it's probably unrealistic because of things like egos and perspectives and identitarian politics. And I'm not entirely sure. And I hear you talking about what's happening in Twitter and YouTube. I kind of think that's happening on the internet. This whole kind of monetization and boosting of conflict. It's exactly what clickbait is. So I see that as being broadly across the whole internet. So I mean, I think once people are confident enough to find their lane and then go for it in their lane, almost no matter what, then that's when they're going to get the most cut through and they're going to get the most audience.
Because people of color, women, marginalized folks, it's harder for them to find that lane because algorithm boosts conflict, but it's really coming from, and you're a great person, so I'm not highlighting, but it's really, you know, the designers are white men who, there's some libertarian practices by a lot of these founders, and I mean, I don't think that's questioned, all of them pretty much at this point. And you know, there's been tons of studies on how these algorithms are being written by white men for white men with conservative tendencies and boosting those folks more than, say, you know, an African American woman who's lesbian, like doing commentary. You know, it's just not. It doesn't have the same results. And so even if there is a lane, it's harder to get those audiences, people like you. And in the meantime, people who might be like you might be, you know, more or less radicalized, whether lightly or extremely. I mean, I've seen friends of mine. My concern though right now is like we can't have a debate, and I don't feel like the left is in a good place when you're lockstep. Like, I'm a good government person and I'm a leftist. I'm somebody who believes in democratic process, which is why I was in the New Reform Commission and which is what we argued for with Bernie Sanders. But I also believe in a debate of ideas. And, you know, I think that there are leftist organizations now that are like, just get rid of process and support candidates, and they'll like shame everybody else in those races, saying, you know, you have to support this person, and if you don't, you're the enemy. And like that also is an issue here, which I think is notable because in some parts of the country right now, the left narrative has been hijacked by some people who think that you should be talking about XYZ, like defund the police, when it has been proven. I mean, I believe in the concepts of defund the police. We make that very clear. But the language has over and over and over been shown to not connect with individuals.
But that's kind of what I was saying. The left don't do messaging well. I mean, last week on our nightly show, we did this exact thing. We talked about some issues here in New Zealand, how the current left-leaning government, although fairly corporate, there's 3 or 4 examples that are getting used by conspiracy theorists now to show how authoritarian they are. And it's because they've messaged things badly. And if they had to spend 5 minutes with someone about better messaging, the concept of what they put across, it's like defund the police. It doesn't mean literally defund the police. It means let's reallocate assets or resources into other areas of the police to have better outcomes when you're coming across someone who's having, say, a psychological breakdown or a mental health breakdown rather than a taser and a gun. But that's terrible messaging. That's terrible positioning. And that's in my opinion, that's a left-wing issue. They do the messaging very badly. And I wonder if part of it's because, and respectfully to my right-leaning friends, the right people are fairly simple. I mean, you hear Dave Chappelle and those people talking about the dusty whites in Ohio, you know, they're a bit simpler and they like a simple message and they like build that wall. You know, they like the 3 words, they like the simple message, but then that's quite hard to spin. Whereas if, for example, here in New Zealand, you hear the Prime Minister saying that free speech is a weapon of war to the UN, which is what she said, you're like, fuck me, that came out wrong. You might be trying to say we have to be aware of the words we're saying, what goes out there and how it's said, but to use those words and the way it was said, or to say at the start of COVID that they are the, quote, single source of truth, which is something else she said. What she was meaning is we're getting the best information at the moment because this is also new. Don't believe Uncle John on Facebook. Come to us. We've got the best. But the way she worded it just leaves this chasm for the right to come through, the conspiracy theories to come through, and they're wording things very badly. It's exactly what I was meaning 5 or 10 minutes ago.
Well, I think this is such a great point because there's 2 aspects here, right? When I talk about the organizations on the left that are creating lockstep, it's pushing out the ability to say, and I think it's coming from some of these organizations that have other interests in, you know, maybe neutralizing the left or in areas of the country where the left is going to win, right? But maybe you don't want someone who's like an independent leftist. So they find, listen, this is just, I've said it online, I don't care. Like at this point, like we have to be very thoughtful about lining up behind people that I always vet candidates. I always vet organizations. I always vet candidates. It could be the DNC, it could be the RNC, it could be the Koch Brother Institute, it could be the Cato Institute, it could be, you know, other organizations. I want to know who funds them. I want to know what their stances are, what their backgrounds are.
Sure.
evolve, that's great. I love when people evolve, but you also have to show me how I've evolved. We've all evolved, especially if we're older. But I don't just fall in line for people without a process. And it doesn't mean that I also personally would support that person if that person got the nomination for, I mean, it depends obviously on the dynamics, if they're up against a Republican or not. But the reason I say this is because there's this, like, if you don't support this candidate, you're not part of the in club, and then you can no longer be part of it. And the messaging gets taken away, and you're in these conversations where you're talking, like, you're hearing these conversations, you're like, what? That's not leftist, or that's not smart strategy. So you've got that aspect. And then simultaneously, you have the Republicans who've had a 45-year experiment where they've bought up all the media stations, local media stations. 15 years ago, newsrooms across the country, local newsrooms across the country went through a crisis. And then, the media is extremely conservative. And if they're not conservative, they're center-left corporate. So we can't get our message out. And then even when we try to, it's being sort of hijacked because we have this, like, sweet spot where the internet was, like, a little bit more free for us to come up with our own ideas, and then, like, that comes. So, I do want to, I'll give a plug for folks right now if you do want to know about leftist messaging. There's a guy named David Fenton, and I used to work for him. I worked at his firm briefly on a project in particular about fracking. And David has been a communications expert for 50 years. He worked with Abby Hoffman. He worked with Nelson Mandela. He worked with Yoko Ono on fracking. I mean, so many different people, Black Panthers, the real deal, right? And he started a political messaging firm, progressive messaging firm, probably in the early 80s. And he knows the psychology of messaging. There's some really great work on it. And he just came out with this book, came out maybe a week ago. And it talks about his life experiences and working with all these different organizations, and then also the strategies and what to look out for. So when I say these things like there's infiltration, like, this guy's world renowned, and he has a whole chapter, devoted to that, and saying we're falling for this divisive politics of separating each other and canceling each other out based on identity, and we should be looking at empathy, and does mean that we should all be better. We should absolutely be better, but that's not. I mean, Nelson Mandela doesn't work that way. So it's. I recommend the book if you guys can check it. I don't know if it's overseas yet, but highly recommend. It's beautiful too. He was a great photographer. That's how he got started. So the photography is incredible.
Dude, all I hear is I think I'm looking for a podcast with them. Anyway, we should probably actually talk politics at some stage.
Oh,
there's that. Because I mean, you're there, you're in the thick of it. What it seems to me is that the kind of 3 states for the Senate that are still in play, Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, it seems to me that Nevada will probably go Republican. There is a ways to go. I did the numbers on this. There's about 200,000 votes to come in based on 80% of the estimated vote, which means that the Democrat would need to win about 115,000 to 85,000 of those votes, which is possible but less likely. It seems that possibly and likely that Arizona will go Democrat, and then it'll all come down to that fantastic runoff over in Georgia.
The rebrand of 2020. I mean, this is where we live now, right? This is the country. This is the pathway now, right? Except Nevada I actually didn't expect Nevada to go that bad. People were
but if something happened, if the Democrats win both of these, it's over. Like Nevada and Arizona, obviously.
We're not.
Yeah. So it's likely, and I'm saying likely. This is just after midday. So who knows what's going to happen in the next 6 hours, 6 days, whatever. But it's likely that one apiece to them, and then we come down to Georgia for the whole kit and caboodle.
Well, here's the thing that concerns me. Say all dynamics are the same, which they're of course not. So let me just preface this with this is not a very realistic projection. But in 2024. If you had the same scenario and these states voted the same way, Biden would lose based on the same math of last cycle. Because don't forget, he had to win Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. That's what he wanted to.
Yeah.
And this is why Trump has spent so much money and time and whatever, maybe not money, but threats on flipping the results in Georgia and Arizona. You know, I don't know what's going to happen with it seems like he's doing well. I don't know what the absentees and the mail-ins, and we'll see how that plays out. And Georgia has a military population. So does Nevada. Actually, Arizona, Nevada, and Georgia all are probably going to receive quite a bit of mail-in votes, but I think that's factoring into sort of the analysis of all this. Arizona looks good. If we can zoom back in on Arizona, I'm fairly familiar, well, with all these states, but I have a lot of family in Arizona, and I worked in Arizona in 2006. You know, Phoenix is a diverse city. It's the largest city. It has gone a little bit more blue recently, but the weird juxtaposition that happens in Arizona and Georgia is you have a very progressive, Tucson's very progressive. So is Northern Arizona, Flagstaff, juxtaposed with this like white, conservative, libertarian, not really like John McCain, whatever that is, not really libertarian. It's like slices of libertarian, but also like, it's just a little, it's maverick, what they used to say.
Yeah.
As well as the QAnon people. And the QAnon people are insane. And that's what Kari Lake is, right? So I'm actually more concerned that Kari Lake did that well in this state, when I really don't think that Arizona is, I know that's a gubernatorial race, but I don't think it's that radical. And I want to understand the numbers. I haven't looked at it in the last couple of hours between how Mark Kelly performed versus how Katie Hobbs did, because Katie Hobbs is much more reasonable. I mean, Mark Kelly is too, but you know, Kari Lake is like out of effing mind.
Yeah, there's been lots of headlines talking about her possibly being the most dangerous person in politics in 2022.
Yeah. And like, you know, Blake Masters is still crazy, but the juxtaposition of Blake Masters to Mark Kelly is less than Katie Hobbs to Kari Lake, and it seems like Katie Hobbs and Kari Lake are closer, which concerns me about just the tone of Arizona. But I have to see those numbers a little bit more. And of course, you know, the Senate, like people may want the Democrats to hold the Senate for whatever reason, but it'll be interesting to see how that one plays out. I'm gonna delve in quite a bit with Arizona because it's just like Georgia, the nuance is fascinating.
Yeah. Hey, now, Nomiki, we're coming up onto our hard out. Do you have just 3 or 4 more minutes? Because I do want to ask you one question. Is that okay?
Yeah, of course.
Because you at some stage were in the political race in this cycle in District 59 in New York. When I hear you talking about, you know, sometimes your own folks turn on you, is that part of what you're referencing? Because I watched it from over here and it was a bit all confusing to me. Maybe you could explain it to me. It was like Sam Seder's show, like we're running for government, Sam Seder's show, woohoo. The next day Sam Seder's show was like, oh, we got to kind of pull back on a little bit of that. And then it was about, you know, is it the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America group had got behind Kristen Gonzalez, and then a whole bunch of left commentators like, well, we always support the DSA candidate, and then there seemed to be conflict between everybody, and then you dropped out and you endorsed Kirsten, who I think won, didn't she? I looked at the numbers. So can you unpack that a bit for me so we can understand how that all worked out? And is that a part of your when you're talking about being turned on?
It's a sliver. I'm seeing it. The people calling, like this is happening all over the place. This isn't just. It is happening everywhere. You don't. It's been going on for a couple of years now. I'd say since maybe 2000, aggressively since like 2000, early 2020, maybe. Maybe even. I mean, I think it started with hints earlier. Yeah, I mean, my race. So listen, we had a complicated redistricting process. Redistricting happens every 10 years after the census. A couple of years after, state legislatures, for the most part, almost just a commissions in New York. We drew a set of lines and district lines that got challenged in a court, a conservative court. And so here's an important part. Number one, everyone knew it was a redistricting year. So folks knew that if they were running early, which was a little bit of a risk, they were likely going to have to run in with new lines. My district, where I lived, was represented by the deputy majority leader of the Senate, and was not even on the table, right? But then they changed. This guy called the special master changed the lines, and suddenly, in early June, they created the new lines, and it included mostly where I live. Now, I immediately got phone calls from people saying, this is a new district, brand new district because of population growth. You should run. And I was like, let me think about it. 3 or 4 days, right? Now, meanwhile, there were 3 women running in a different district. And when I say it was a different part of Queens, it was a different part of Queens. It was like miles and miles and miles away, different culture, more conservative. Elizabeth probably was from there. Some say that district was drawn for her. It is a conservative area. And Kristen Gonzalez, who had grown up in that district, but from what we understand, had not lived there for a while either, was running in that district against Crowley. And she was recruited by an operative to run. And then she went through the DSA process very early, which was questionable. Like, I sit on the board of an organization, and we didn't go through our endorsement process until after redistricting because we knew the issues. And there was debate about supporting her at that time. So I supported her against Crowley because it was like a sexy thing, like run against Crowley again. Meanwhile, a new district's created. Neither of them resided in the district and decided they're going to run in this new district that I lived in. And I said immediately, we'd love for DSA to have a new process for new voters who live here in this district. And they were like, well, there's this one part of the district that overlapped with the other one, which is true. But neither of them lived in that area. So that's just the regular dynamic. Now, what happened with Sam Seder's show is unfortunate, and I haven't spoken about it, but what I will say is that before I decided to announce, I shared the news with both Emma and Sam, and I think Sam is much more aware of the scenario than maybe Emma is. And I invited them on a surrogates call where all of our surrogates joined before I announced. Emma did not join. And then the next day, she announced she felt like she was bamboozled because she didn't know that NEOS had endorsed Kristen in the previous district. I provided a whole rundown of events. We connected them with people. She refused to talk to me. And then suddenly, and Emma's never been a DSA member, by the way. And suddenly she teamed up with the Left Reckoning guys who were just like, we support DSA. Simultaneously, there's been some issues within DSA in terms of like organizations taking it over and consultants taking it over and pushing the agenda. Now listen, I'm a leftist. I ended up supporting Kristen, but I do not feel she's representative of the democratic socialism I learned about.
Right.
I don't believe in rezonings. I don't believe in development. I believe in community support. I believe in democracy. And they went on a really aggressive smear campaign against me and supporters of mine and people who live there locally. And then they made things up about what I said. And, I came together and I talked to her and I asked her first to support some issues. So she earned my endorsement and we spent money. And the reason why I'm being a little bit more vocal now is because a couple of days ago, the guy who recruited her to run went after me and said I didn't spend any money on helping her win. First off, I didn't have to. I didn't even have to endorse her. She, it was a left district. But also, we did spend money, and I think it's really in bad taste to throw that at somebody. So I've had my conversations with Kristen. It's great, and I wish her luck, and I hope she's the best senator she can be. But I urge DSA, something that an organization I've been a member of for many, many years, unlike my opponents, all of them, to change their process, be more open and transparent, and if a district changes, which they did in other parts of the city, maybe have a new process so that the residents of that district have a say, not outsiders, because that's what was happening. Outsiders were. So it got really toxic, but it gets noisy, and it was hurtful because they erased a lot of the work I've done in the community. They made things up and said I moved there from Tucson, Arizona 2 years ago. I was born in Tucson. I went to college in Tucson, but I grew up in Buffalo, New York. I've lived in New York for over 10 years. And prior to living in New York, I didn't live in Tucson. I was in college in Tucson. So it's just, they used a lot of, they lied about a lot of things. And, that's not representative left. I didn't lie about her. Don't lie about me.
So when you got to because I was looking at, it's nothing to do with you, but looking at Alaska and kind of reveling in the Democratic Party member winning because there was 2 Republicans running and split the vote beautifully. One of them being Sarah Palin with 27% of the vote, which I think is more than hilarious.
Well, they had a ranked choice system, so it's a little
yeah. I don't know the time frame. Like I said, from thousands of miles away, you don't get the nuance. But did you, as soon as you found out that she was running with you, the DSA candidate, is that when you dropped out immediately, or did you run against her for a while?
No, because there were people. Well, there was other stuff happening too. Like we were having conversations with people that were going to do dual endorsements of us, who felt that the process was not great. There was no concept of splitting the vote. This is a district that Bernie won by like 80%. So they used that as a smear attack against me. I had stronger name ID. We had internal polling. Like, we raised $60,000 in like a little over a month, whereas it took her 9 months to raise 150. And then they started raising money off of this debate, off of this controversy with me. And that's what really, it just felt icky. And I don't like doing things that feel icky and are not reflective of the community. I don't think that the campaign, they kept like me, like I'm the dirty. I had people following me. I had, I have a police report against somebody right now. Like it was not cool.
Wow.
It was not cool. I'm not saying that they were direct. Well, I'm not saying her campaign was directly responsible for some of this stuff, but there were people in DSA who were following me around. One person was outside of my apartment door, which is in a building, and we have him on camera. We were followed to events. Some guy stormed an event and we had to call the police on him. And he was like telling people to come after me. A guy put a video putting a vex on me and like one of my staffers. It was insane.
A vex.
But this is politics today. So I'm not saying this because like I'm saying this because we have to be careful about these attacks against people, because somebody can see it and take it the wrong way. And this is what I was trying to say to her and her campaign was like, we all live here together, right? I lived here for longer than all three of my representatives combined. And I'm not like one of the longest residents of the district. Like that's a concern, right? A lot of people locally are concerned that like people are importing candidates knowing it's a left district and playing on that low turnout.
Yeah.
And I think we need to have like a real conversation about, is this who we really are or not? So there was no such thing as splitting the vote. I got out of the race. I put whatever resources I could into moving my voters over to her. And I sucked it up, and I believe in a Democratic Senate because I was the only person who fought for a Democratic Senate. I fought against the IDC to have a Democratic Senate. Why would I let go of my legacy for spite? And I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Is that last couple of questions? I'm sorry, we've been longer than we were, but these are my last couple of questions. The length of time we spend on this, Nomiki, will depend on how long your answers are, not how short my questions are.
Okay.
Is that something you want to do? Do you want to get into politics still? Is that is that a bucket list? Do you want to be elected to do something in somewhere?
I think that listen, there's a lot of evolving that in terms of good government that the left has to kind of move through it right now, because we can't fall victim to things that have happened in the past where we let institutions be taken over by special interests, whether we're conscious of it or not, to push their own interests. And the game is it seems shiny on the outside, but on the inside, it's if you're not lockstep with the party bosses on any side, you don't really survive very well. So I'm very independent. I will continue doing what I'm doing, supporting candidates I love, going around the country raising money for candidates I love, locally, statewide, in my community. I'm fighting against some rezonings that are happening that are affecting the affordability of the fastest growing city in America. I'm going to go to Albany and continue to lobby. I have my own pathways to pushing for change in the meantime, but it doesn't mean that I'm going to like check out and go do knitting on the beach or something.
Yeah. And also sometimes it's better to be outside the tent throwing stones in than inside the tent having it out. Hey, and have you been back on the Majority Report since? Have you got plans to go back on?
Way before that. This had nothing to do with the campaign. People know this, that I ended my show because it was too exhausting, frankly. So I love Sam. I support his work. I've always supported his work. I was a good friend of Michael Brooks, and I miss him deeply. I think the show is going in a direction, and I'm happy to have conversations with Sam, one-on-one in a deeper way. But, I think that there's other avenues right now.
Well, Nomiki, sorry for holding you for an extra 5 or 10 minutes there, but we very much appreciate you giving us some time today. And we look forward, I guess, to the results over the next few days. And I don't know, maybe we'll connect again in the first week of December when that Georgia runoff happens to see who gets control of the Senate after all.
Oh my God, I'm looking at it right now. So the U.S. House, Democrats have 187 seats right now. Republicans have 206 in the House, and we're at 48, 49 in the Senate. So it might just come down to that. So happy to do that.
Very good. Nomiki Konst, thanks for joining us today. Really appreciate your time.
So thank you for really creating the space and informing. You're really tapped into U.S. politics in a way that I think most people aren't. So I really appreciate that. You get into the details. I wish I knew about New Zealand politics more than.
Well, we've got an election next year. Come and be a friend of the show, and we'll talk about that then.
Happy to.
Alrighty then, that's us. We are done for another evening. I hope you enjoyed Nomiki. I do apologize about the audio at the start. I don't know what's going on with my system. I need to get someone in to have a look at it, because sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, and I change nothing. But we got through it in the end. Yep, Stephen noticed the point that Nomiki made, which he found particularly interesting. If you're not lockstep with the party bosses, things don't go very well. And Paul says, she's so chuffed you asked her about that after a couple of wines. I wonder if you mean the conversation around Sam Seder. Yep, maybe so. I don't know whether she said she hadn't talked about that before. For those of you who watch, like me, content from all over the place, you may know of that situation. But it was interesting to hear her perspective on it. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know whether that's cleared up for some people or whether it's not, but there you go. It is what it is. Okay, no problems for people who are saying cool, cheers, thanks Pat, cheers Pat, cheers, cool, cheers, cool, cheers, cool, cheers. Someone in my house is baking a carrot cake right now and I can smell it. I'm downstairs in the basement of my house and I have an HRV system, so when people are cooking in the kitchen, the smells go up into the ceiling space, then they get filtered and blown down here. And someone's going away for the weekend and taking baking with them. And my studio smells amazing. So I better go upstairs just in case. Oh, shit, no, I can't, can I? I was going to say just in case some testing needed to be done of the carrot cake. But, this year is about losing body fat. So maybe I can't. It's so funny, actually. Not that I'm going to be talking about this, but I am very much looking forward to Christmas Day. And I expect on Christmas Day to take a whole bunch of put a whole bunch of weight back on. It's like, when people are training and doing things, they have a cheat day each week. I've got a cheat day this year, and that is going to be Christmas Day. Okay, team, let's put this up super quick and just say, if you enjoy what we do and you want to, one of the things I was talking about, this thin-skinned person earlier from Dunedin area. If Chewy's still watching, I know it's Chewy's in the chat. He'll know who I'm talking about, that I had an interaction with on Twitter today. One of the things he's saying is, whoa, so where's the funding coming from for this stuff you do? Where's the funding coming from? Like there's some nefarious, and I've just been messaging him back going, oh, George Soros, Big Pharma funds us. And eventually I said, oh, no, the truth is Jacinda Ardern gives me pocket money each week in a brown paper bag, like one of those brown envelopes that people used to get their wages in. So that's where the funding's coming from. The truth is, as you know, and as most people know, we don't get funding at the moment. We're doing this off our own bat. We're building something, and we're trying to build something towards next year. I'll tell you, if you like, I've said a few times, I've been talking to radio stations, etc. I'm going to be doing some work for Today FM over summer. I'm going to be doing some talkback shifts on Today FM, and it would be cool to have you involved if you're around through that kind of summer period, that Christmas, New Year's period. I'm going to be doing some talkback shows, which I used to do as a permanent job on News Talk ZB. And when I was up in Auckland, I went and had a meeting with the bosses at Today FM, and they said, "Would you like to do some works over Christmas?" And I said, "Yes, I would. That would be fun." So, thankfully, in this day and age, I'll be doing it from Dunedin, but I'll be broadcasting nationwide. I think they've set me up about 8 shifts. So when I've been talking for the last few weeks about doing a little bit of work in the radio industry, that's the work in the radio industry, doing some talkback shows on Today FM through the summer period. Other than that, we don't get funded per se. We don't earn enough money to actually pay our time for this. We are building. We would be, if we were a startup, we would be called pre-revenue. a minimum viable product, an MVP. But if you want to get on board and help us pay some bills, that's pretty much all it is. Patreon.com/Big Hairy News. There are 6 layers there. Next weekend, so 8 or 9 days from now, we'll be having another monthly meetup, a digital monthly meetup, probably on Zoom, if you want to be involved. And anyone who is a patron before next Saturday, whether it's a $5 a week patron, or for all those people watching right now who want to be $250 a month one, and I know most of you do, then you'll be invited to a monthly meetup. We had one last month, which I forgot to record, so I couldn't upload it. But as you see, if you are a patron, you also get access to early content. So there's the content with Nomiki that was up at about, it was up 10 hours ago. And when we get early things, we put them on there, or else we put full interviews on there, like this one with Lucy Thomas from Groundswell, and this one with Chantel Baker, that don't then play on the show. They play on only on Patreon, and then we play clips on the show. So patreon.com/Big Hairy News. And the other way, if you don't have $5, $15 or $35 to help us keep the lights on, so to speak, then probably almost the best way you can support us, the most important way you can support us, is to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Doesn't cost a cent, and to share our content around that you like. That conversation with Nomiki is live. It will be live in about 10 minutes on YouTube, so you can share that anytime you want. And there's a clip from the Nomiki conversation about the Sam Seder situation, or the Majority Report technically situation. You can share that around, and anything else. Tell people about us, be our advocates, tell them where we are and what we're doing, help us grow the audience. And that's another way you can support us, be our allies, so to speak. All right, team. Thank you for joining us tonight. We'll be back tomorrow night. I'm pretty sure Chewy's with us. I'm trying to set up a special for tomorrow night. It's 50-50, but if it's not tomorrow night, it could be the following week. I'm not going to say who it is because because there is some, I'm not going to say who it is, doesn't matter why, but it has to do with the world of disinformation. The people giving out a good, clean, proper information to try and counteract all the disinformation out there at the moment. So that's part of the conversation I'm trying to set up. I hope it's tomorrow night. If it is, follow me on Twitter, and I'll make sure I let you know during the day. If it's not, I'm hoping it might be next Friday night. Cool as? Hey, Nala, are we ready for bed? Or are we ready for carrot cake? I think we weren't ready for carrot cake. All right, team. Be well. Thank you for joining us. Thanks to being with you. I don't know what that sentence was. All the best. Take care. We'll speak to you soon. Ciao.